All right, so in this video, what I want to do is get you more familiar with Azure CLI. It's very, 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 very important that you get some scripting, programming, any kind of exposure to that because most technical roles in cloud require you to touch some kind of code-like thing. And again, Azure doesn't always let you do ClickOps with all their services, and sometimes you'll be copying and pasting commands. So it's important we get comfortable with that as soon as possible. So what I'm going to do is go in the top right corner and open up Cloud Shell. We learned how to do this previously. So watch the Cloud Shell video if this is the first time you're launching it. I'm going to go ahead and increase my font size to large. We're going to wait for this terminal to start. I just recently had Cloud Shell open, so it opened up very quickly. For you, it might take longer. And I want to remind people that the Azure CLI is pre-installed on here. So if we type in AZ, we should get back some output. Just understand that sometimes there are network latencies, so you have to be patient, but we're getting stuff back. So what would be really interesting is to go ahead and launch something, anything here, via the CLI. And so before we do that, I just want to show you how would you find out CLI commands. Of course, we can type in AZ and see them here. Another way that we can look at Azure commands is by looking it up. So we can say Azure CLI reference documentation, because that's often what CLI interfaces will have, is they'll have a reference documentation. And carefully looking here, this is at the Learn website, which is fine. We'll try the first one here. And what I'm looking for here is the reference. So here it says Azure CLI reference, and I'll click reference A to Z. I personally don't like the way that Azure lays out their docs for the CLIs. I definitely prefer the way Google or AWS does it, but we got what we got. And so here we have a bunch of different commands, and they are going to correspond to different things. So let's say we want to launch a storage account, which is something that is very common for us to do. I'm going to type in storage, which is one option. And we're going to go here and just expand it, and we'll look at summary. And so we have some options here. One thing I want to point out with the documentation is the status. So the status indicates whether these CLI commands are going to be supported, or whether they might be gone in the future. So GA stands for general availability, meaning that Azure has decided that they like this feature and they're going to keep it. Preview means that they're very likely to, they might bring this feature to all customers, and Azure likes to have a preview and a general available. I think it's a subscription or something. Somewhere there's a way to access it, or the portal's different. I always forget. But my point is that if you want to utilize preview features in Azure, you have to go somewhere else to do that. And so if you try to use a preview feature and it doesn't work, it's probably because you're not in the whatever preview setting. I'll do another video on that, so that's very clear. But my point is that always stick to the GA. Do not touch preview. Do not touch experimental, because if they do get rid of those things and you rely on them, you're going to run into trouble. But anyway, I'm interested in AZ storage, so I'm going to go ahead and click into here. And notice that when I click into storage, we have a big drop down of a bunch of stuff. And again, notice where it says type core, so it's a core command, or some are extensions. Stick to core, stick to GA, and they just have a lot of CLI commands. Other providers like AWS and GCP do not have this many commands. For whatever reason, Azure likes to take their services and put them under umbrellas, and they also like to just keep adding stuff. And so you might have CLI commands that do exactly the same thing. And so there are a lot here, and it can be really hard to figure out what to do. So I'm going to go over to ChatGPT, and we're going to get its help to kind of narrow down what it is that we want to do. So I'm going to say I want to create a blob storage account via the Azure CLI. And we'll go ahead and narrow down the commands it's going to provide us. Now, ChatGPT can go out to the internet and it can bring us back stuff, but we have to double, triple check it because it's not intelligent, despite it being called AI, but it can give us an idea of where to get started. So the first thing it's telling us to do is to do AZ login. And that's great, but we don't have to do AZ login, because when we use Cloud Shell, we're already logged in. If we were to install the CLI on our local computer, we would have to utilize AZ login in order to first gain access, so we can skip that step. The next thing it's just, saying is to create an Azure resource group, which that makes sense. We always need to create a resource group. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. And I want you to follow along and do this in your own account, okay? So the first thing we want to create is an Azure resource group. And so we'll just quickly talk about that here. I'm going to open a new tab. And every time I do that, it wants me to log in, totally fine. And if we type in the top here, a resource group is a way of grouping together resources. And it's different. Like if you come from AWS, everything is within an account. If you're in a GCP, everything's within a project. And in Azure, everything is within a resource group. And so before you create any resources, you need to put them in a resource group. And often you need to create a resource group. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go back here, and this command is az group create. So let's go take a look for that command over here and find it. So I'm going to type in resource. Not very useful. So what I'll do is just search for it manually. And we have resource manager. That's probably what it is. And here we have az group. I think that's the command it's asking us to do. We'll go ahead here. And we have create. So we'll go ahead and look at this. And we can see it requires some parameters. It wants the location. So that is something it might want. It says that's a required parameter. There is the name. That's a required parameter. Then we have some optional parameters, and we can do some tags. So here it's saying resource group and location. And so the location is going to be a Azure region, and then the resource group is going to be the name. So let's go ahead and start typing that in here. So I'm going to say az group create. And then we'll do, sorry for the little pop-up there. It gets in the way. I'm going to expand this to make our lives a bit easier. I'm going to put in here, we had a short flag. So we have the long flag or the short flag. I'm going to use the shorter one because it's a bit easier to look at. And we'll do L. And we probably can do US East 1 or East US. That's what it is. I'm thinking about AWS right now. That's my problem. And the other thing is the name. So that's a -N. Apparently it can be -G as well, which is fine. So we'll do that. And I'm just going to say Azure CLI, and this will be blob, because we're going to create a blob storage account. And so what that's going to do is it's going to go ahead and create it. And so notice we got JSON back. That's usually a good indicator that it is working correctly. Notice that the provisioning state is succeeded. Sometimes this will come back and say it's creating, but resource groups create basically instantly. Let's go over to our resource group tab, and we'll give it a refresh. I want to point out that sometimes Azure is very, very slow in showing you what you've done. Azure's portal is one of the most robust portals compared to every other provider. And that is great. But the disadvantage to it is it's very hard for Azure to propagate that information to us. And so sometimes you will do something and you won't see it, and you'll think that you did it wrong or you didn't create it. But all you got to do is wait around. So just have a lot of patience when you create something, you don't see it, and double, triple check with Azure. So here we can see we've created our Azure CLI blob. So that is there. I'm going to go back over to our instructions. And we're going to look at the next one. So here it's saying AZ storage account create, and it wants the name and the resource group and the location, the SKU, and the kind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here, and we're going to look for storage. Okay. And again, I just really want to point out that if you're going to use any generative AI, don't blindly follow it. Double check the docs. Always double check it. So here, I think we're doing AZ storage account create. Yes, we are. And in here, I'm going to search for create. Here it is. Good. And notice it has a lot of flags. So there is a lot here. I'm not sure exactly what we'll need for this, but I'm pretty sure we can do these basic ones and it'll be fine. So I'm going to go back over here and type in AZ storage account create. And then let's take a look at the flags it wants. So it wants the resource group. So let's go over here and take a look at the flags. So resource group can be a -G. I think I like that, so we'll do -G. And it wants it to be the name of the resource group. We name this Azure CLI blob. So we'll go ahead and paste that on in here. Good. We'll go next back over to here, it wants a name. We know that we can put -n for name here. And notice that the resource group allowed us to use the -g or -n flag to name the name. But in this one, -g means the resource group and -n means the storage account name. So there might not be consistency in terms of the flags between, like short flags between different commands. So again, just always double, triple check and don't just assume. We'll go here to the right. We have our location. So we'll go here and do, well, we got to give a name for this storage account. Now, storage accounts, I believe, have to have all the, everything lowercase, no spaces. Azure is notorious for having crazy naming for every service. They're all different. And I think it's treated like a URL, like a domain name. So you have to make it unique. So I'm going to say here, my storage account, and I'm going to just put a number in here. So I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll say AB for my initials. You make it very unique so that you don't run into any troubles. We're still not hitting enter. We'll go back over here. Did we do the location? So do -L East US. And we'll go back over here again. And then there's the SKU, the kind. So I know the storage is going to be version 2. That sounds good to me. So I'm going to double check and look for the short flag as I prefer those. So we'll go -kind here. And so we have a few options: blob storage, blob block storage, file storage, storage version 2. So I believe that we can do blob storage under storage version 2. So we can do either or. So I'm going to just stick with storage version 2 because it's totally fine. And this one doesn't have a short flag, so we'll have to do it in full. Also note that if we're using the CLI, we're pragmatically doing stuff. It's not going to warn us about free tier stuff. When you use ClickOps, you get a lot more information through the portal. When you're using the CLI, it's just programming, so it's not going to give us the same amount of stuff. So we'll go back over here, and we need the SKU. So let's go take a look at what it wants for the SKU. The storage account SKU. So this is going to determine the replication of resources. And so I just want to go with the standard one. Now notice it says a default value. So sometimes if there's a default value, if we don't include it, it will default to it. So I'm hoping that's what's going to happen. I'm going to purposely leave out the SKU. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter and see what happens. Okay, and so it's creating it or running it. And we'll just give a moment and see what happens, okay? All right, so we got a bunch of output back, and it looks like it was successful. So what we'll do is we'll double check. We'll go to the top here to Microsoft Azure. We'll type in storage accounts. And we can see that we have our storage account. So we've done something programmatically. There is more stuff that we can do here. We can go ahead and create our blob. We can list the containers. I don't want to do all those things right now. I just wanted to get you a little bit experience working with the CLI and being comfortable with that. Another thing I can say is that the CLI will allow you to output to different formats. It might be -O or something. I'm not sure if it'll show it here because that's kind of a global flag. So yeah, it's -O. And so let's say we wanted data in a different format. We could choose something. Instead of JSON, we could get table, YAML, or something else. So I'm going to go here and just say, here it says Azure Storage List. I just want to list all the accounts. So I'm going to see if that works here. I'm going to just say AZ. I'm just guessing, but I think it's AZ Storage Account List. And will that list out storage accounts for us? Notice it came back as JSON. So if we wanted to change the output, we can give it a -O flag. And the output format probably will vary per command. So don't expect the output format to be for all of them. This is default to JSON. Let's take a look at YAML and type that in here. There we go. So that looks a lot more readable, and I really do like YAML. We could also try table format. So let's do that. That's a very common one when you're in the terminal. Okay, there you go. So kind of looks like a table. It's a lot of information, so maybe not as nice as we'd like it to be. But that's the basics of working with Azure CLI. It definitely gets a lot more complex than that. But again, I just wanted to give you confidence with it. So now that we are done with that resource, I just want to go ahead and delete it. So I'm just going to go ahead and close out Cloud Shell. And we're going to make our way over to resource groups. So I'll type in resource groups at the top here. And on the left-hand side, I'm going to Azure CLI blob. Here is that resource that we created. I'm going to go ahead and hit delete resource group. And I'm going to go and enter the name. I like how they say enter the name, but you can go ahead and copy paste it. The idea to type it in is to make sure that you know what you are deleting, but they've even expedited that. So that is deleting. And that's all I really wanted to show you with the Azure CLI, okay? So we'll see you in the next one. Ciao.